The Luxor Hotel and Casino opened its doors on the 15th of October 1993, after only 18 months of construction. This glossy, jet black pyramid is 3/4 of the size of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Its light beam is the strongest light beam in the world, visible to pilots flying over 200 miles away. But whilst this is one of the most iconic hotels on the Strip, it is also said to be the most haunted. From curses to murder, poltergeists to people falling, the Luxor has a mysterious and dark past. Welcome to the Ghosts of the Luxor, Las Vegas. Many are convinced that the Luxor Hotel itself is cursed. Some speculate that the hotel's construction, with references to ancient Egypt, failed to pay attention to crucial details, leading to a spate of bad luck. Visitors to Las Vegas can be reluctant to stay at the Luxor due to it being modelled on a tomb, which might bring bad luck to those gambling. The Luxor Hotel Sphinx that guards the entrance to the hotel faces east, but should the Luxor have been flanked by two Sphinx to protect from evil on both sides? Many believe it should have. And does this explain why so many suspicious deaths have been recorded at the Luxor over the years? Egyptian pyramids were built on the west bank of the Nile, which, as the site of the setting sun, was associated with the realm of the dead in Egyptian mythology. When it opened, the Luxor included a 300,000 US gallon Karnak lake, located near the entrance between the Sphinx and the obelisk. Computer-controlled fountains would spray water up from the lake by day and become part of a free evening show in which lasers shot out from the eyes of a sphinx. The lasers would project Egyptian imagery onto a 50-foot-high water screen formed by the fountains. The show was designed to compete with a popular strip attraction, the volcano at the Mirage Resort, but it failed. By the end of 1995, the Federal Aviation Administration ordered a shutdown of all laser light shows within 20 miles of the nearby airport, putting an end to the Karnak Lake attraction. Was this attraction gaudy, tacky and disrespectful to the Egyptian culture? Many believe the land the Luxor's neighbour, Mandalay Bay, was built on is also cursed. It is situated on relatively swampy land, which caused the Mandalay Bay to sink more than 17 inches during its construction, as its weight squeezed moisture out of an underlying aquifer. At least 5 ghosts are said to haunt the pyramid of the Luxor, Las Vegas. The apparition of a middle-aged man wearing a striped brown old-fashioned suit and hat has been seen wandering through the upper floors of the pyramid. Those who have encountered him have said he walks with purpose, determination, and will walk right through you if you don't step aside. He has an angry, stern expression, and an odour of unwashed bodies, cigarettes and alcohol is connected with him. Intense cold spots are felt when he is present. Is he a mobster, perhaps the subject of a hit returning to Las Vegas, or could he be a victim of a homicide elsewhere in the area? In Clark County in 2022, there were 178 murders on record. A popular theory as to why the apparition of a man in a brown suit is haunting is linked to history and organised crime. At one point, this land at the south end of the Strip was off the beaten path and is said to have been a dumping ground for those who found themselves on the wrong side of the mob. The history of Las Vegas and its links to the mob can't be ignored. During the mob's heyday, from the late 1940s to the mid-1980s, casino skimming and money laundering were the names of the game. But many mob experts would argue that mobsters buried their victims in the desert. The phrase 86th is said to refer to dumping a body 8 miles out of town and 6 feet under. Whilst there were certainly incidences of desert burials, it is likely the mob purposefully avoided doing its dirty work in and around Las Vegas. If there were the kind of mob murders that people would witness in New York or Chicago happening in Las Vegas, it could scare tourists away and be detrimental to mob operations and financial gain. That's why famous Vegas mobsters were murdered elsewhere. Extremely powerful Las Vegas mobster Tony the Ant Spilotro and his brother were killed and buried in Indiana. Riviera casino manager Gus Greenbaum, his wife Bess, and his associate Willie Byoff were assassinated on separate occasions in Arizona. The grisly list is also likely to include anonymous mob underlings who simply disappeared. But most agree that the idea of burying people in the desert predates the mob. There are certainly stories of fur trappers who left rival gang members to die. Several apparitions at the Luxor are linked to its construction. The Luxor was built by Circus Enterprises at a cost of $375 million. But its construction was riddled with setbacks and tragedies from its early days. William Bennett, the chairman of Circus Enterprises, stated that the Clark County officials were overly critical of the project due to its pyramid shape. After 12 floors of the Luxor were constructed, Clark County changed its requirements for fire precautions, costing the resort an additional $7 million. This financial hit may explain why there was such a rush to construct and open the Luxor. Perini Building Company served as the general contractor, and the project employed more than 150 contractors and 3,500 construction workers, several of whom died while building the resort. Whilst the deaths of 3 construction workers were reported in the news, many believe the actual number is said to be 7, and some are convinced their deaths were covered up to protect the company's reputation. The construction of the pyramid's steep, sloping sides meant the job was difficult and dangerous, but those who lost their lives may still be lingering at the Luxor. At its opening, the resort featured an indoor River Nile tour, a paid 15-minute ride that brought guests to different parts of the pyramid, particularly from the check-in desk to the lifts or inclinators as they are known. The tour boats passed by replica pieces of ancient Egyptian sites and artefacts on a river that encircled the casino. The river was a hefty construction. It was 910 metres long, but it was removed after only 3 years. When the ride was operational, a number of guests claimed to see the ghosts of the construction workers roaming in the tunnels. Many believe this was one of the main reasons the Luxor demolished the river tour after only a few years of service. But it seems there are even more phantoms who refuse to leave the Luxor. Room 30018 is home to an angry poltergeist who makes startling metallic rattling sounds at 8:30 in the morning. So loud are the sounds, guests can't sleep through it. It seems this entity wants the guests to leave and regain its personal space. One of the most disturbing ghosts at the Luxor is known as the Deadly Blonde. A number of guests in different rooms have reported waking up to see a beautiful blonde woman looking down on them. But then the unexpected happens. She reaches out her elegant arms and places her ghastly grip around their necks. Others have woken up gasping for air, sweating and with heart palpitations, their chests tight after dreaming of a beautiful blonde woman reaching around their necks. A couple staying at the Luxor in December 2016 encountered the Deadly Blonde on the 12th floor. The female woke when she felt what she thought was a spider crawling down her neck, which then turned into a hand that grabbed her throat. She leapt out of bed, and as her husband woke up, they both saw a woman with blonde hair standing at their bedside. They spoke to reception, who did not seem at all surprised about the incident and offered to move them to a tower room. Other strange incidents include people hearing hammering on their doors in the night, but when security are contacted and they check their cameras, there is nobody there. When the Luxor opened, it had roughly 2,500 rooms across 30 floors in the pyramid. Its unusual design, with 39-degree sloping sides, created one of the world's largest hotel atriums. Guest rooms in the pyramid exit onto the hallways that look straight down over the atrium, which for some gives the hotel a wow factor, and for others is a terrifying prospect. Deaths in Las Vegas hotels are not uncommon. Most will be from natural causes, but some are definitely not. The Luxor's first death was reported in 1996 when a lady plunged from the 26th floor of the hotel. She was seen sitting on the railing with her feet dangling over, and just moments later, she landed in the location of the buffet at that time. At present, the food court occupies that space. Mysteriously, the identity of the woman is still unknown. The police thought she was a Hispanic or Asian woman in her 30s, but she did not carry any identification or a purse at the time of her death. To this day, her dental records and fingerprints still do not have a match. Many conspiracy theories are linked to her death. One is that she worked as an escort and had recently been diagnosed with HIV. Others claim she was involved with the Las Vegas underworld and was pushed over the railing deliberately. Her apparition is said to haunt the 26th floor, as well as floors 12 to 14, and many believe she is trapped inside the hotel. People have reported hearing an invisible person rummaging through their luggage during the night, and report the sensation of being pushed by an unseen force. The death of a man who fell from the 10th floor has also created rumours and legends. Some say he was dangling over the edge of the balcony and holding onto the railing in an elaborate stunt to ask his girlfriend to marry him. He threatened to let go if she said no. Whatever the girlfriend's answer was, moments later he fell, landing on the front reservation desk. His apparition is said to roam the casino floor. The Titanic exhibition at the Luxor opened in 2008 and has 25,000 square feet of display space. A number of staff and guests have experienced some strange events inside the exhibition, which includes over 300 artefacts recovered from the bottom of the ocean, including the big piece, the largest piece of the wreck to be recovered, weighing roughly 14 tons. Along with a number of parts of the ship itself, many of the exhibits are extremely personal, including clothing, luggage, glasses and jewellery. The question is, do people remain attached to their worldly possessions when they are dead? A museum artefact specialist has experienced his name being called late at night, around 11 o'clock, after the exhibition has closed. He has also heard giggling, experienced his hair being pulled and his clothing being tugged. Other members of staff have heard classical music playing and had small projectiles such as pens and badges launched at them. On a number of occasions, staff and guests have witnessed a woman wearing a black dress with a white collar, her hair in a bun, on the replica of the grand staircase, and have heard the sounds of women's heels on the steps themselves. The exhibition includes a replica of the promenade deck, and it is here that the Titanic's lookout, Frederick Fleet, is seen, peering out into the darkness, looking for the fateful iceberg. Frederick Fleet was one of 6 lookouts on board the Titanic and was on watch on that terrible night. When he spotted the iceberg around 11:40 p.m. on the 14th of April 1912, it was too late to avoid a collision. Although he survived the sinking of the Titanic, Fleet battled depression for the rest of his life, and in January 1965, he ended his life aged 77. Footsteps are often heard in the accommodation display area, where visitors can see the differences in accommodation for the different classes. In this space, people often feel they are being watched, and some people have left in absolute terror. Could this section of the exhibition act as a portal to the other side? Inside the exhibition is a portrait of Bruce Ismay, the chairman and managing director of the White Star Line. After the disaster, Ismay was heavily criticised by both the American and British press for deserting the ship while women and children were still on board. Some newspapers called him the coward of the Titanic, or J. Brute Ismay, and suggested that the White Star flag be changed to that of a yellow liver. This portrait of Ismay is reputedly haunted. On one occasion, overnight, the picture fell to the floor. What puzzled staff is how such a large glass-fronted portrait fell without breaking. Security cameras were checked, and it seems the picture slowly journeyed down the wall to the floor, turned on its side, and gently slid down a few more inches to the floor itself. It was as though invisible hands had moved the portrait. Perhaps a lost soul who was offended by the portrait on display. The motion sensors did not activate from this incident, but have gone off elsewhere in the exhibition when nobody is around. Other times the portrait is said to shake as if caught in an invisible earthquake. Is this the apparition of another passenger, making it quite clear that Ismay's betrayal is not forgotten? There's no lack of horror stories coming from the Luxor, and a number of tragedies have taken place there over the years. In 1996, a man employed as a dishwasher at the Luxor was shot and killed in his car outside the Excalibur. The deceased man had begun dating a maid from the Excalibur. The shooter was her estranged husband. In 1997, the body of a 16-year-old prostitute named Sarah Gruber was discovered by a maid in a room at the Luxor. The room had been booked by Michael Hathaway, who had met Gruber in a bar in the Luxor just 2 days earlier. An autopsy determined Gruber had died of asphyxiation by strangulation. 30-year-old Michael Hathaway was arrested and charged, and in court he pleaded guilty of first-degree murder. In May 2007, a homemade pipe bomb went off in the Luxor's car park. One 24-year-old man was killed. He was a member of staff at Nathan's Hot Dogs in the Luxor's food court. The bomb was underneath an upside-down plastic cup. When the cup was moved, the device exploded. 2 men were arrested and sentenced to life without parole. It seems the victim, 24-year-old Durante Antonio, was targeted as he'd started a relationship with one of the bomber's ex-girlfriends. During the incident, the hotel wasn't evacuated and operations didn't stop at all. The highest-profile murder at the Luxor took place in 2010. A former football player, Demario Reynolds, became involved in a fight with another guest at a party, a mixed martial arts fighter named Jason Simon Sindelar. Sindelar was involved in an altercation with his girlfriend in a pyramid room in the Luxor. Sindelar was drunk and Demario intervened, trying to restrain the MMA fighter, who assaulted and killed him. In a strange twist of fate, the autopsy declared the cause of death as an overdose. In December 2010, Deborah Flores Narvaez, a burlesque dancer in the Luxor Hotel's fantasy show, went missing. Her disappearance was entirely out of character, but family members of the missing girl pointed the finger of blame at her ex-boyfriend, Jason Blue Griffith, the last person Debbie was reportedly seen with. He was a member of Cirque du Soleil who were performing at the Mirage. 1 month later, Debbie's body was found. she'd been strangled, dismembered, and placed in concrete-filled plastic tubs in an empty house. Griffith was convicted of murder and was sentenced to 10 years to life in prison. In summing up, the judge, Kathleen Delaney, stated, "The responsibility for this toxic and ultimately tragic relationship continuing as long as it did is entirely yours. The only reason I can see was to satisfy your own narcissistic predisposition." 2012 was a particularly difficult year for the Luxor. An airman was visiting the Luxor from Nellis Air Force Base when he got involved in an altercation with a colleague in the hotel lobby. At 3:30 a.m, as the punches were thrown, the airman was pushed up to an elevator door in the West Towers lobby area, which unexplainably opened despite the elevator not being present. He fell 25 feet down the empty shaft and died later in hospital. The Legionella bacteria, which causes Legionnaire's disease, was found in water samples at the Luxor after testing. Though the Luxor did respond appropriately, superheating and chlorinating the water, this effort couldn't save one guest, who died from the infection. In 2023, 18-year-old Emma Cusack was charged with the open murder, robbery and grand larceny of a motor vehicle in connection with the shooting and death of her 36-year-old boyfriend, Charlie. The incident took place on June the 29th, 2023, in a room on the 12th floor of the Luxor Hotel. The two had originally met on the dating app Bumble, exchanged about 30 texts, and later decided to meet in Las Vegas. After consuming alcohol together in his room, an argument ensued, and Cusack reportedly shot Charles twice in the head during the altercation. She later stole his car, but abandoned it just a few blocks away and turned herself in to the police, claiming that she didn't mean to shoot him, but had nowhere else to go. Is the Luxor Las Vegas cursed? Do the ghosts of those who lost their lives here still haunt the rooms, the casino floor and landings? What do you think? I am going to warn you now, this is quite a long postscript because it's got some quite specific events in it. So if you haven't got yourself a cup of tea and some snacks, maybe you want to go ahead and get those. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the ghosts of the Luxor Las Vegas, and I was only in Las Vegas just in March actually, not very long ago. So I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. For those of you who don't know, and I have covered it in my shorts, I went over to California to stay on the Queen Mary. That was the main purpose of the trip. But in order to get there from the UK, I flew to Las Vegas and just stayed there for a few days. I actually started making a video about the ghosts of the Las Vegas Strip and started material on 2 other hotels, but it was going to become such a long video. I thought, well, I'll save that for another video, perhaps Ghosts of Las Vegas, if you're interested. Let me know in the comments below if that's something you would like to see. Let me tell you about what happened when I stayed at the Luxor Las Vegas quite recently. There were 2 rather bizarre incidents. Now, if you've watched some of my shorts, you might remember that I made some from the Luxor and they are still available if you want to go back and have a look. I quite like the Luxor and our room in the pyramid was absolutely fine. If you do go, please be aware it's quite basic. There's no fridge, there's no kettle or coffee making facilities. And the only thing I would say is that if you have a fear of heights, the atrium could be challenging for you if they give you a high floor. When you look down, it's a very, very long way, even for me on floor 16. So I'll tell you about the first incident. I don't necessarily think it was a paranormal incident, but it was just a bit odd. So our flight from London Heathrow was delayed. So by the time we'd checked in and made it to the 16th floor, it was about 11 o'clock at night. So we came out of the lifts, or inclinators as they call them. I just call them lifts. So we walked along to our room and we each had one suitcase on wheels and we were not making any noise at all. The suitcases were on this rather garish carpet, but they were completely silent. We reached our room and just a few doors down from us, maybe 5 doors along I think, there was this really weird man looking out from his room and looking directly along the corridor at us. We hadn't walked past his room or disturbed him. And he had a really pale, like a properly white, rounded head, no hair. And I know it sounds strange, but his head was like a white, fat beach ball. And I remember his face because even though he had quite a fat head, he had really narrow and quite pointed features in his face. And I remember immediately thinking that he looked exactly like Bob Ewell from the film To Kill a Mockingbird. And that was my instinct straight away. But he was really scowling at us as if we'd done something terribly wrong and that we were disturbing him. But the other thing I thought was odd was how low down he was in his door frame. I only saw his head, no shoulders, no body, but he was about door handle height, which for most people is about waist height. And I just thought, what is that man looking at? Anyhow, we went into the room and I said to Mr. GC, did you see that weirdo looking man looking at us? And he said yes. And we both agreed he was quite an odd-looking fellow. We didn't think anything of this until 2 days later when I decided to film a short on my own as we were going to go to the Titanic exhibition that week. If you look at this picture, which was the view from our balcony, we were around the back of the Titanic exhibition. That black box that you see at the bottom of your screen, that is actually the Titanic exhibition. And I wanted to film a short where I'd walk around to the opposite side of the hotel and film downwards so that you could see the Titanic sign nice and clearly. That was the plan. So in order to do that, I had to walk all the way around to the opposite side of the floor that we were staying on. And I'm filming my short and I'm talking pretty quietly because I'm stood outside somebody's room. And I finished making my short and I looked to my left and just a few doors down, again, low down in the door frame, is that man again. And this time he's much closer to me, but he's on the opposite side of the hotel and he's staring at me. If you look in this picture, you can see the second light on the right-hand side of that little wall. He's there. He's looking out at me from the door that is there. And this time he's got a really weird, wry sort of smile, like a smirk. And I don't know whether he watched me film my short. And he was definitely not there when I walked over. I'm 100%. There was nobody else on the landing. The only person I passed walking all the way over to there was a maid with a trolley. So anyway, he's looking at me. And then very, very slowly, he retreated back into his room, still smiling at me. And I remember this because he tried to shut his door as quietly as he could. And I was close enough to hear it closing. So I'm stood there and I'm thinking to myself, how did that man know I was even there? I wouldn't have walked past his room. He wouldn't have seen me through the little spyglass thing or whatever it's called. Anyhow, I thought to myself, right, I'll head back to my room. Now, rather than walk back the way I came, which on reflection would have been the sensible thing to do, I thought it would be a bit quicker if I carry on and walk on ahead. So I walked very quickly past his room. And the second I was outside his room, his door opened at lightning speed. I heard the door open and now I'm panicking. And I literally started running in my sketchers and turned the corner to run along the other landing as fast as I could. And as clear as day, someone is following me. There is somebody behind me running at speed. And it's not an echo and I can hear them. They are right behind me. And I kept running until I got to the area near the lifts and there were some people there. So I turned around just to see if somebody was behind me and there was nothing. Nobody there. The whole corridor is completely empty. And I got back to my room and Mr. GC said to me, "Are you all right?" And I explained that I'd seen that creepy man again and that I thought I'd been followed. And then Mr. GC said, "Imagine if he'd caught up with you and chucked you over the balcony." And I thought, thanks, Mr. GC. Anyhow, after this, we agreed that I wouldn't go to places on my own in the hotel, if possible. And we were only in Las Vegas for a few days, so yeah, it was a little bit of an unnerving incident. Logic would suggest maybe he was somebody waiting for a food delivery or perhaps a visitor of some sort. I mean, After all, this is Las Vegas. And could he have moved rooms? Was he just a nosy person? Was it just my mind jumping to conclusions? I've got no idea. But there's one thing to say about this incident, another thing to mention. The short that I made on my Samsung phone didn't record. I have nothing to show for it. So the following day I went back over there with Mr. GC and filmed it again, but this time I completely refused to stand as close to the door as I had when I'd filmed it. And we didn't see the man on that occasion, but we did go back the way we came. And we didn't pass that man's door at all. So the creepy man incident happened a few days into our stay, but the other incident that happened was on the very first morning after we had arrived. And this is the strangest one. This happened to me on the very first morning when we woke up. So we'd been in the hotel for less than 12 hours when this happened. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I decided to head down to one of the shops inside the Luxor to see if I could buy some milk to make some tea, because we'd brought a travel kettle and some tea bags, but we didn't have any milk. So I headed towards the red lifts, and there were really quite a few people stood waiting, quite a queue for these lifts, which are notoriously slow. Everybody knows those lifts are really painfully slow. Anyway, finally, a lift arrives that's going down, and the green light comes on indicating it's going down, and the doors opened. So all these people in front of me with their suitcases head over to it, and I think to myself, I'll head over thinking I can squeeze in. And in a flash, they all turned around, and I hear gasps and cries of, sort of sounds of disgust. And I said to this guy, "What's wrong?" And he didn't answer me. But I finally looked in the lift. I don't know why I'm laughing, it's not even at all funny. And there is a man in there lying face down. And I must have just looked at him for a few seconds. And when I say face down, I mean properly face down. His nose is pressed into the tiles of the lift. He's got his right arm bent, that's the arm nearest the lift doors, and he's completely still. He is not moving at all, nothing. He literally looks like when the police draw around a dead body. And I turned to this other guy and I said, "Is he dead?" And the man just said to me, "I don't know." And that was it. And with that, the lift door closes and off this man goes. And I'm just thinking to myself, dear God, is there a dead man in the lift? And if he's not dead, he could be asleep, I suppose. But who sleeps with their nose pressed into the floor like that? Anyhow, none of the people waiting for the lift seemed remotely bothered. And I'm thinking, I think I might need to do something. Anyhow, I walked away from the lift to an area where there's an ice machine, and I think I was in a bit of shock actually. I had my phone on me and I had the phone number for reservations in my phone in case we had a problem checking in. And I called the check-in number and ended up speaking to a woman, and I just said to her, "I'm staying in the Luxor," and I gave her my room number. And I said, "I think it's possible there's a dead man in one of the red elevators. If he's not dead, I think he might be ill." And to be fair, she was very calm, and she sort of said, "Ma'am, I'll get somebody to look at that right away. And, have a great day," or something like that. And I'm stood there thinking, this is turning into a nightmare. My first morning, and I think I've seen a dead person. And I stood there looking out into the atrium, and I think I really was in a bit of shock. And, you do get people passing out and being ill in lifts all the time, but for some reason, I think this was a bit more serious. Anyhow, I stood there for about 5 or 10 minutes, and I thought, well, I'll let all these people with their cases head off. And eventually I made it into a lift and stepped out at ground level without any guests or dead people or ill people or whatever it was, and headed to go and get the milk. And when I stepped out of the lift at ground level, there was already a maintenance sign on the lift, the first lift, the one that had the man in it. It was a sort of waist-height frame around the doors. So I think somebody was onto it quite quickly. So I went and got the milk, and by the time I got back to the lifts, there were quite a few people on walkie-talkies, members of staff, talking very quietly, and I was desperately trying to hear them, but sadly I couldn't. So I don't know what had happened. I'm not really sure if this person was deceased or not, but I was desperately trying to hear them, but I couldn't. So I ended up getting back in the lift and heading up to the room. And Mr. GC says to me, "Where have you been? I've been waiting ages for a cup of tea." And I said, "You've got no idea." And so I explained everything that had happened. And so I don't know whether it was a dead person in the lift, but yeah, quite a strange event, one that I've never experienced anything like in my life. I've just got two small things to show you today. Firstly, I have a menu. I chose this because of the cover, and I particularly like the fact that the man on the right has got this really intense gaze on his face as he's smoking his cigar, and I love the woman's blue eyeshadow, and I do think that man in the black jacket looks a bit like Super Mario or something like that. But this is a menu from 1986, and it's from the SS Canberra, which was an ocean liner and part of the P&O fleet. She was built at Harland and Wolff in Belfast, the same as the Titanic, and she was operational from 1961 until 1997, when she was scrapped. And she would travel all sorts of different routes, including to Australia and to the UK, and all sorts of cruise routes, and her nickname was the Great White Whale due to her colour scheme. And she was also employed as a troop ship in the Falklands conflict. She was also used in Diamonds Are Forever, which was Sean Connery's last Bond film, and the Las Vegas Hilton and Circus were also used for filming locations, so even more links to Las Vegas. And I had no idea about this before I bought this menu. So let's have a look. I must say my menu collection is getting bigger and bigger all the time. I don't really know why I love them so much, but I think it's because they reflect the time, just like fashion, really. So let's have a look at this dinner menu. I'm not sure ox kidneys would go down as a hit. Maybe at the time they would have, even with wine and shallots. Glad to see roast, boiled and creamed potatoes on the menu rather than chips. I'd probably go for the hake with spinach and mashed potatoes. It all looks very nice, all quite comprehensive. Quite a big dessert list. Some ice cream on the menu. I wonder if someone had died and they'd had to make room for them in the freezers like they did on the Queen Mary. Who knows? And then we've got a wine list and some prices. So all in all, a rather nice menu from a cruise ship that is no longer. And I've just got one postcard for you, which is from 1997, so not so long after the Luxor had opened. Dear Ma and Pop, having a burning time. It is 10:45 and in the 70s. Lots of changes in Las Vegas. New massive hotels built in 2 years and more to come. Food as you would expect and know, wall to wall and cheap. Been to Hoover Dam, Lake Mead, very impressive. Abigail is happy because it is very hot. Hotel is huge, pools are cold. Hope everybody is well. And obviously I think that family are having a great time. They're from Aberdare in South Wales. So Las Vegas would be very different from the South Wales valleys, I'll tell you that right now. So that's it for me from this video today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe, and also please find me on Instagram. I'll leave a link in the description box below. Take care guys, and I'll see you on the next one.